I'd like to start with a premise that scientific data should be available to anyone who is curious. Obviously, there's an asterisk here. Some data are sensitive, some data are so niche that no one, apart from a few people, really care about them. But in general, scientific data, uh, if we're talking about key environmental variables, a lot of data are publicly funded and should be available to anyone. And that anyone includes you, of course. We are all mostly here data providers, but perhaps fewer of us are data consumers who are going and actually retrieving data. And this should change. So I'd like you to imagine that each of these points here is a data point collected somewhere in the Arctic. This could be from a range of different data sets, but imagine that they're all collecting similar data. Perhaps it's seawater salinity values or something like this. In an ideal world, someone would be able to go and drag a box over this over some time period and download these all into their computer so that they can start working on this. It shouldn't be so difficult for people to go and find all the data that they're looking for. Of course, in reality, data are located in a lot of different locations physically around the world. We have a network of data centers. For someone who wants to efficiently access all of these data, all the data they're interested in, this network needs to behave as an interconnected network, a network that has rules and conventions that each of the data centers are following and ensuring that each of the providers, data providers are following as well. If we have this, and if this is behaving as an interconnected network, it shouldn't matter where the data are stored. A user who's interested in data related to Svalbard should be able to find all these data and combine them all into a single combined data product. This is the vision of what a observing actually means to have an observing system, that someone should be able to come and use the data that are contributing to this observing system in an easy and efficient way. But what does this mean in practice? How do we achieve this? Well, if we want to make data available to anyone who is curious, we need to provide services that allow this aggregation to be done for you so that you're not having to go and find a lot of different data sets individually and put them together before you have something that you're ready to work with. This is what data scientists spend a lot of their time doing, and if we do it properly, this could be automated and people can focus on the more enjoyable parts of science. If I asked everyone in this meeting what data format they'd rather have their data in, I'd probably get a selection of different answers. So we need to be able to serve data in people's choice of format as well. And we need to be able to make the visualization and analysis of data easy for people. These three targets kind of align with the goals of the SciAS data management system. These are long-standing goals that we've had for a long time. The first is to provide data findability and availability, and we're getting quite good at this through our portal now. The second is visualization of data. I'm going to show you some examples of how we are providing this. And the final is aggregation of data, combining data sets together. We're not doing this yet, but I will discuss this a little bit towards the end. So let's start at the beginning with findability and availability of data. So many of you will be familiar with this. This is the advanced search on the SciAS data portal. You can see that you can search for data using a selection of facets on the left and right hand side, when the data were collected, where in the world they were, some keywords, and so on. A note here that what we have here is as good as what we are provided with from the contributing data centers and the data providers. We can only make filters based on this if the data if the data have metadata about this. If you haven't included some keywords, then we can't provide an option for people to find data based on those keywords. A new thing last year, as I mentioned, was a simple search. This is a way of making something that's a bit more user-friendly. And eventually, maybe there'll be a drop down to have these advanced filter options. But for now, they're two separate pages. And people have a choice of looking for data how they want to. So to make this possible, we need each data set to have what is called discovery metadata, which is metadata that helps someone find or discover data. An example of this is the keywords. If we have different data centers that are using different keywords for essentially the same thing, when we're trying to provide a searchable catalog for this, it's very difficult because then you have to go and select each of these keywords individually. And this is why it's important that we use controlled vocabularies and conventions for this. If everyone is using the same word for seawater temperature, we can create a filter option on the side where you can return all the seawater temperature data. We need more from the working group members on this, ensuring that conventions are followed and served at their data centers and with the people who provide data to them. We have interoperability guidelines on all of this, on how we're serving metadata. But more work can be done on here to make this service better for potential data users. You might have noticed on the beginning slide that there's a lot of data centers that you saw that you might be aware of, some popular data centers that weren't on that map. I'm not going to name them now, but people who know me will know which data centers I am referring to. And it simply isn't practical to connect all of the data centers to a single access portal. If we want to provide this, to connect a data center to a data access portal, we need to use conventions so that we can use the same software to create a single link from one data center to a data access portal. Then we can reuse that software to create links from the same data access portal to a range of different data centers, but also from the same data centers to a range of different access portals. So you'll find that if you have your data available via SIOS, you might also find your data in a range of other different places as well. So we have Scion, which is providing data access across the whole Arctic. And there's the Polar Data Search, or POLDA, which is bipolar. Let's move on to the visualization now. If we want to be able to provide visualization of data, the data need to be machine actionable, which means that basically someone, a data manager like me, can provide some code that can read not just your data, but anyone's data of the same type. And there's some requirements for this. The data need to have a standardized structure so we can predict exactly where the data are within the file. We need metadata that describes those data and describes who have provided those data, where they're collected, and things like this. All of the metadata terms need to be taken from controlled vocabularies. So it's all well and good having a load of variable names, but if there's ambiguity, it's very difficult for us to know what to do with those data and what data we can combine and so on. The formats need to be software independent. No one should have to download some expensive proprietary software to access the data. But this also extends to things like Excel and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to open an XLSX file in 100 years' time, but more to the point, if you open the data and rely on the formatting of Excel cell formatting, for example, this isn't going to be open if you available if you open the data programmatically. And if you're trying to open the data in another spreadsheet editor, like LibreOffice, for example, there's sometimes changes that can be made to the formatting or contents if you're not careful. So go for software independent open formats. And all of this, the software, the formats, the vocabularies, the metadata, it all needs to be well documented and maintained. It's all well and good having a good format, but if that new cool format is not really maintained 10 years into the future, then that's not very good. So I'll propose a few options based on what SDMS are recommending. We have CFNet CDF. This originally this CF is for Climate and Forecast Conventions, and as the name suggests, this was originally for weather and climate data, but has really been expanded to be able to encompass any measurements of the physical environment where you have data on one or more dimensions. So we have time series of data, vertical process profiles, maps of data, cubes, and so on. It's not just the measurements of a physical environment, but also outputs from models can also be stored in this format. We have a lot of big climate models in CFNet CDF, for example. A big thing we've been working on this year is the publication of point clouds in NetCDF. I'm not sure if we will talk about this within Polar Night Week, but there'll probably be some announcement around at some point. But this is some really nice work we did with Norse, with some Dornier data, where we have some remote sensing data with quite high resolution, and we hope to provide some visualization on top of these data in the future because these data are machine actionable. Satellite data, we provide this in NetCDF through SciOS as well. And I've even worked on some more, I guess, niche kind of data, like flow cytometry data. We've managed to publish these in CFNet CDF on a few occasions, and this has gone really nicely. And I think even things like sedimentary logs, which are basically just vertical profiles with some different numbers associated with them, this could be a suitable format as well. The other format we recommend is Darwin Core Archives. We're not serving a lot of this through SDMS at the moment, but there is a few data sets available. This was originally developed by GBIF and other associated groups that work with biodiversity data, but has been expanded to allow you to encompass all different kinds of measurements that might be associated with those species. So if you have some fish and you want to include the weight or the color of those fish or something like that, you can put that in a Darwin Core archive. The species list can come from DNA data, it can be fossil data, so this is useful for paleontologists as well as biologists. I'm often perhaps told that I talk too much about NetCDF and not other formats. There's a reason for that, and I just like to be transparent with exactly where we are with SDMS and some different formats that you may be thinking about working with. There are some data formats that are open but not machine actionable that don't have some standardized structure. So if you have some data in JSON or XML, there's an infinite number of ways to create a JSON or XML file. So these data are not machine actionable by themselves. For formats where you have a consistent structure, but perhaps there's not really well documented standards and there's insufficient metadata within them. This could be stuff like PLY or LAS format for point clouds, basically any format where you get data directly from an instrument. This is consistent from that instrument, but is perhaps not machine readable. And even NetCDF, if you're not using the climate and forecast conventions, this is just a container, really. And there's a lot of work being done internationally to develop more standards where there are metadata conventions, but at the moment we're not recommending it for SciAS core data, and it's a little bit of a grey area of whether we recommend them for different data types. So here we have stuff like GeoJSON, GeoTIFF, GeoSAR, and CAML. So hopefully we will be branching out to start recommending these other formats in the future as more work is done to make the data fully machine understandable. There might be other data formats that I've not mentioned here. If you're ever wondering what we think of a certain format, just get in touch. It's nice for us to be made aware of new formats and what data formats people are interested in working with. But I want to talk a little bit about why, generally speaking, it's better to have fewer data formats and standards. This means that there's fewer standards for us as a community to learn. This makes it easier to share data between disciplines. There's a lot of discipline-specific standards out there, things like GRIB for meteorological data. Sounds like a great idea at the time to develop some standard which is specialized for a certain type of data, but it makes it very difficult to share those data with people who work on other stuff. And it's a lot more efficient for us to integrate data into services and maintain them. There's only every time there's a new data format that we want to try and work with, we've got to build some code to work with that, and also we've got to maintain that over time as the standard develops. So fewer standards is generally a better thing. And if you have too many standards, that kind of defeats the purpose of having a standard in the first place. As I mentioned, it should be possible to download data in your choice of format. So if you have NetCDF, provided some data in NetCDF format and they're available through SciAS, and you have this OpenDAP URL, you can download them through SciAS into a CSV file. We also serve satellite data, Sentinel satellite data through SciAS, and you can download these in NetCDF and also in GeoTIFF soon as well, we hope. So there'll be more work on this in the future, I'm sure, to provide data in a range of different formats. I'm going to show you some examples of visualization and what's available already now. This is some Sentinel-2 satellite data. A reminder that these data are not stored physically with SciAS. These are stored with the Arctic Data Center at the Meteorological Institute. And what we've done here is we've taken this web map service URL, and we can embed this into the services that we provide with SciAS. A little visualization as well of some sea ice concentration data provided by the OSISAF product. And here we have, again, used the web map service, but in this case, you can select different time periods and look at the data or whichever date you're interested in. Important to SciAS is the SciAS core data. We're aiming to have this observation system where we have combined eyes on SciAS, I suppose. SciAS core data are a time series of data where we have at least a 5-year commitment to provide these data. And there's 69 data sets there available, at least as of a few days ago when I made this. So you can select one of these data sets, as I'm doing here. There's an option to visualize these. All of these data are in CFNet-CDF at the moment. And here you can see depth profiles of soil temperature data, and I'm selecting different periods in time. And then you can switch this around as well and look at the time series of data at different depths. So this is a really nice example of the work we've been doing with improving the visualization in SciOS at the moment. And I think we're really starting to see some of the rewards of having this unified observation system and hopefully making it a bit more worthwhile for people to put the effort into making their data machine readable. It's not just um, it's not just it's not just SaaS core data that we provide this visualization for. As long as you're providing data in NetCDF with an OpenDAP URL, we can provide these on a feature type attribute. We can provide this kind of visualization for this. I was asked to talk a little bit about granularity. There's always a question of how you divide up your data, whether you've dumped everything together, perhaps from a single cruise, or whether you take individual profiles and publish them each separately. And with SDMS, we're recommending you do the latter. So you publish data with a finer granularity, which means there's more files. There's several advantages of this. Firstly, you can describe the data in more detail. Perhaps you have different people responsible for the different profiles, so you can include this. Also, with the metadata, you're describing where the data are collected, right? So if you have this cruise of data, you can only see this on the search portal as this bounding box. You can't see the points where you have actually sampled. So someone has to open the data to be able to get this information, which makes it a lot easier to find data if you're publishing data with finer granularity. There's also fewer degrees of freedom if you're publishing data with finer granularity. You can imagine if each of these is a vertical profile, you only then need to have a single dimension, depth or pressure perhaps. Whereas if you have this entire cruise of data published together, you need to have a few dimensions, time, pressure, and depth. There's some questions of what you do for latitude and longitude. And generally, the more degrees of freedom you have, the more difficult it is for us to build and maintain services on top of the data. So one case of where we've developed this year, we've had this UNIS hydrographic data that's been published about 5 years ago now originally. And this was 76,000 profiles from 2019 going right back to 1876. And of course, it's very then difficult to find when and where data have been sampled within this. So at the Arctic Data Center, what we've done is republished these data as one file per profile. You can then select on one of these. There's a button for visualizing the data. This needs to be updated so it doesn't say time series. And you can see then you can have a look at the data. You can select different variables that you're interested in, the temperature, the salinity. Again, these data are not stored by SciOS. They're stored with the contributing data center, and we've streamed this OpenDAP URL into our services to provide this visualization. A quick word on aggregation. This is not something we're providing at the moment. It's an ambition that we have. In the case of the previous data set where we have all of these 76,000 data sets, ideally you don't want to have to download loads of these, I understand that. But perhaps we can use this as a test case so that you can drag a bounding box, give us a start date and an end date, and we can provide some service where we download all of this into a single NetCDF file for you. This is only possible if we use higher granularity to begin with. It's difficult to take everything that's previously stored together, separate it, and then put them back together again. And back to the premise at the beginning, are fair data available to anyone who is curious today? Unfortunately, no, they're not. It's a pretty good world at the moment now for specialist users who are aware who are capable of doing things programmatically, who are quite comfortable and familiar with the interfaces that we have. And for the general public, we're not quite there yet. And you are probably somewhere in the middle. Maybe you're a specialist user, maybe you're getting started with these things. But the point I'd like to make is if we publish data that are machine actionable, the goal is that eventually we should be able to make these available to any curious member of the public. You have to begin making the data available for machine for those specialist users, making them machine readable, and then we can make more and more processes to simplify these over time and make the interfaces better, to make the aggregation better, to make the data much more impactful and available to anyone. And data that are not machine readable, that are not fair, they will only ever be as accessible as they are at the time that you publish them. You could make a case that people might be able to understand your Excel file that you're publishing, but it will never get more understandable than that. So if you take one message from this, publish data today based on what should be possible in the future, or in the future we will have no data from today. I provide a lot of tutorials talking about data online. If you're interested in this, scan the barcode, subscribe, and get in touch if you have any questions, or I will take questions now.